Jake Paul versus Ben Askren. So amongst other things, we're going to be looking at why this particular non-verbal communication signal
against Jake Paul, against Jake Paul, against Jake Paul,
and this particular bit of body language analysis.
Ben, I guess I want to ask you when this. Ben, I guess I want to ask you when this. Ben, I guess I want to ask you when this.
Gives us all the information we need to know. Is Jake Paul the real deal? Is he as confident as he's trying to convey? Or is it all smoke and mirrors? Is he trying to convince himself he is, whilst really being scared underneath the water? So welcome back to the Believer in Bruce channel. We're here, body language, psychology, performance, anything to do with the head and heart. Take 2 seconds to subscribe to the channel. Let me know your comments below. What do you think is going to happen in this fight? This fight that has got the boxing community, the YouTube community, MMA community totally ripped apart, but everybody is talking about it. Now, a lot of people don't like Jake Paul. He's the Marmite man. Some people love him, some people hate him. Very few people are in between. But you could say it was the same for Ben Askren. You know, he was a very polarizing character within the MMA community, and that's what we've got. A fight between Jake Paul and Ben Askren, a boxing fight. So we're going to look at here the body language, the non-verbal communication signals that are being given off during these press conferences. And there's something that I think, in fact, I'm not aware of anybody who's picked it up. Nobody's talking about it. But what is throughout this press conference that presents itself time and time and time again, that gives you so much insight into the mental, the cerebral, the psychological landscape, that could be a huge factor to see if Jake or Ben wins the fight. Let's get straight into it. One thing what I would like to bring your attention to is the sitting posture specifically of Ben Askren. 98% of the press conference, the timeline that we follow, he hardly moves from that position. Right towards the end he does, but I'll explain that later on in the video. But watch this step-by-step guide, because that is so important. From a body language perspective, it screams what is going on inside Ben Askren's head, and it might be not what you think. Now, the first display we've got from Jake Paul, that maybe is not all as it seems. Jake Paul is a very gregarious character. He's very, I've already said he's very polarizing. It really annoys me, all right? But you've got to acknowledge that the guy can box. On what we've seen, on the data that we have, he can box, okay? Let's be fair and balanced here. Whether you like him or not, you know, it is important, but it's not when you look at his boxing capabilities. But the first bit of body language where there is a lack of synchrony, all right, where there's not that congruence, where it starts to be, ooh, there's some fluidity happening here, is when he's talking about when Ben Askren choked. You know, he choked at the Olympics, he choked at the UFC, and he's going to choke with Jake Paul. Watch what he does with his hands, people, all right? Watch what he does with his hands. Because when he's talking about the Olympics, there's a slight movement maybe to just put his hand on his knee because he knows what he's going to say. When he's talking about he's choking at the Olympics, there's a slight move. When he talks about he choked in the UFC, there's no movement. When he talks about he's going to choke against Jake Paul, at that T-junction, that's where body language is, that's where performance psychology lies, right in those critical moments. When he said that, watch what his hands does with his kneecap. He rubs that kneecap way above his emotional baseline. And remember, we've got 3 statements. You choked at the Olympics, you choked at the UFC, you choked against Jake Paul. Watch his hand action when he says he choked against Jake Paul. You're going to choke against me. That is Jake Paul giving himself a self-soothe. Whether you like Jake Paul or not, put that to the side. Biology doesn't lie. You cannot argue with the data. All right, when he is saying he's going to choke against Jake Paul, he's not that confident. His body language is saying, hey, this might happen. I hope it happens. Please happen. Have a look. The data doesn't lie.
you know, a guy who choked in the Olympics, a guy who choked in the UFC, and now a guy who's going to choke against Jake Paul,
Remember, this is Jake Paul. He is a high control individual. He's like that with Anison Gabe. He's like that with Nate Robertson. He's high control. He bombards them. He criticizes. He belittles. That's how he controls the situation, all right? And you can see that he starts to do it here to Ben Askren. When Ben starts to talk, Jake abuses him. He belittles him. He does everything to affect his manliness, everything that he can possibly throw, because he likes to be in control of that situation.
You know, he kind of came up in his brother's shadow. He's trying to fill his brother's footsteps. You know, his brother is a lot more talented, has a larger following. Those type of things.
You literally went on your Instagram and asked people for roasts. You asked people for roasts on your Instagram, and that was the top comment, was say that his brother is better than him.
Is he?
That's like calling Kylie Jenner Kendall Jenner. Like,
now again, this is where Jake looks a little bit uncomfortable, okay? And it's just a split second. Just a split second. Believe in Bruce is on it though. You give me a split second reaction. The poker tell, boom, I'm on that. Ben Askren is saying that, or I don't know if it's true or not, okay, but he's saying, I didn't know much about Jake Paul. I was asking the kids in the class, you know, who's Jake Paul? And he gives Jake some unhelpful labels. You know, he's a dick, he's a bully, etc. I can't remember what it was, but they weren't, you know, they weren't positive. They were, yeah, you could fairly class them as negative. And the camera just, in a split second, it sort of comes back wide and you'll see Jake bent over rubbing his nose. Now again, we've talked about the Pinocchio moment. What the nose rub is, it all depends on the context, is undeniably a sign of being uncomfortable. Okay, uncomfortable. So when Ben's giving these labels, talking about these labels that are being attributed to Jake, and the camera just opens, he's bent over rubbing his nose, he is uncomfortable. Why am I telling you this? Why should that be important to you? If you find you are ever competing with one person or people, and you do something and they look uncomfortable, crank it up. Crank it up, brothers and sisters. Crank that up and keep doing it. Keep working through your inner voice. That, you know, you may be even feeling awkward doing it, but when somebody feels uncomfortable, there is a stress reaction. If you can tap into that and discover that's the crack, boom, go in there and never let go. But have a look. Ben talks about it, Jake rubs his nose. There is a sign there, undeniably, of discomfort.
Mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu. And, you know, I thought, well, from his angle, what's he doing? And, you know, I asked some of my kids at my academy, you know, what's this guy all about? And they said, he's a bully, he's a dick. And so I think from his angle, it was like, who he's
Now this one here, Jake looks like he's up for it. He's talking about a number of MMA fighters called him out. And I love the way he references Conor McGregor, Diaz, you know, some of the most well-known UFC names to date. It was just rolling off his tongue. I do like that. But where we've got here is that when he says it's Ben Askren's big payday, it's right at the end of it, okay, right at the end of it that tells me Jake is up for it, or at least in that moment, he is up for it. You'll see the purse of the lips, right, he's pulling that pressure in, he rolls his sleeves up. Rolling the sleeves up is a universal, okay, a universal sign of getting ready for something, going to meet the task, getting stuck in, whatever it may be. You'll understand this, I understand. Hey, even, you know, politicians, presidents, prime ministers, you'll see them now rolling their sleeves up when they're coming to talk to the public. It galvanizes, but for sure, it is a sign of I'm getting ready to do this. So for me, in that moment, Jake is absolutely ready to go. Now, it may be the context is different. It may be that he's sitting in that, you know, the seat environment. He's already stood up and offered him out, and, you know, I've got 27 people behind me, so there's a high probability we're not going to actually have a fight, as Ben Askren puts it. But in that moment there, when he's talking about, like, this is how the fight's going to go, this is, you know, Ben Askren's biggest payday, make no doubt about it, Jake is up for the moment right there. Remember, if you want more information, I get lots of messages, you know, Bruce, can you do one-to-one sessions, can you do seminars, etc. There's a free resource if you're interested in body language, performance psychology, mental health, you know, really getting hold of your head and heart to optimize your own performance. Head across to believeinbruce.com. Now we've got Ben Askren here. His seating position still hasn't changed. He's talking about 2021 being a good year to beat up the Paul family. Some guy asks him, you know, what will you do if you beat Jake Paul? Will you go and, you know, beat Logan? Yeah, 2021. It sounds like I might as well go kick all the butts of the Paul family. But his seating position hasn't changed. Now, up until this point here, Jake's abused him, he's threatened him, he's offered him for a fight. And he's never moved out of that position. Now, when someone threatens you, okay, and I'm going to talk about Jake Paul's emotional baseline here. As I said before, he's been up, he's been down, he's offered him for a fight, he's been on his phone, he's twisted, he's basically done anything but sit still. Ben Askren has not moved. Now, when it comes to composure, when it comes to patience, some of the fundamental things that, you know, some people aren't even aware of in the fight game, is that this is what we are seeing with Ben Askren. This is what we are seeing with Ben Askren here. His amygdala, like, yes, he might be getting irritated, but not that much. That's the key. Not that much that he feels the need to move around in his seat, or, you know, sort of pull at the collar or crack his knuckles or anything like this. He's sitting there just taking it. He is comfortable in this situation, is my point, and Jake Paul is putting it on him. All right, that is his emotional baseline. He is calm in the storm. So my point here is that if Jake Paul cannot put Ben Askren away, and I'm not saying he can't, by the way, I think Jake Paul has got a fair arsenal of tools to draw on. I don't like the guy, but you must acknowledge the data, is that if he cannot put Ben Askren away, I wonder, because of Jake Paul's emotional state, the frenetic energy that he brings, where's his resilience? I'm not saying he hasn't got resilience. I'm not saying he hasn't got conviction. I'm not saying he can't cope with it. You know, if things don't go on, is he an on-top fighter? You know, he only performs when things are going his way. We're not sure. He hasn't answered that question yet. But what we've got is those two displays. Jake very frenetic, Ben very calm. And again, we've got another example here of Jake trying to take control. So Ben's saying, you know, those groupies that you brought to my room, are they on the payroll? You know, basically, are they your real friends, or are they just taking you for a ride? You know, they're only with you for the money. And straight away, Jake tries to control the situation by flipping the joke, by demeaning, by embarrassing. You know, say something funny. Say it again so people may laugh. That's how Jake tries to control the situation.
In life.
Hey, I was wondering, your
thing.
cheerleaders that you brought to my room, like, do you pay them as coaches or groupies, or do you just give them like sloppy seconds and social media shout-outs?
Maybe say your joke again, and we can all remember to laugh. Say it one more time. We can just all laugh afterwards, just so you feel good about yourself. Say it one more time for us. No.
And here we have
the spark.
The touch of the cheek. Now somebody, oh Bruce, what the hell? Touch of a cheek, what does that mean? It means everything. It means everything, brothers and sisters. He is asked, Jake is asked about, you know, is Ben your toughest fight? Yeah, it's not those words, but it's something like that. You're like, do you rate Ben as your toughest fight? You know, he's Olympic background, all this type of stuff. And Jake says no. This T-junction,
no.
What does your body do at that particular time? So he's been asked a question. That thalamus has kicked in. The amygdala has heard it. It's taken as a threat. The hypothalamus, all right? Pituitary gland, adrenal, it's pumped round. He feels uncomfortable, and just before he says no, just after, it's one of the two.
No.
See, he touches his face, he touches his cheek as he answers.
No.
He didn't have an itchy cheek because he didn't use his nail, all right? It's a touch, a random touch, watch it. That's a self-soothe. So you've got the self-soothe with the kneecap, you've got the self-soothe with the touch. Biology doesn't lie. I can't make this up. I am presenting to you what is available to be noticed, but you just may not have noticed it before.
The spark.
No.
The spark.
No.
The spark.
No.
When he asked about Ben Askren and Jake says, no, he's not a threat, whatever it may be, watch the self-soothe. He doesn't believe what he's saying. And here we go with the last bit, all right? The push, the face-off, if that's what you can call it. Now, when Jake fought Gib got a lot of stick for this thing that occurred, the push, the non-push, whatever it was, okay? But here we've got where Jake Paul, where that sweet spot is ripped away from him by Ben Askren taking control, by, you know, shoving him in the face. Now, I was expecting Jake to take control from Ben Askren here, as he did with Gib. I said he would do that in one of my videos, and boom, there he did. All right, he actually done that. But what we've got is Ben Askren shoves him in the face, and at that moment, that limbic system kicks in, the fight or flight. Jake, in those 2 to 3 seconds, does not know how to react. We get the weirdest, weakest right hand punch that ever. He talks about, you know, Ben Askren fighting a granny at the start of the press conference. My granny could have threw a better right hand than that, okay? And then there's this weird, weak, limp-wristed push thing that he does. He can never take the mick out of Gib again. This is terrible. Why is it terrible, though? Why is it not controlled? It's because Ben Askren has took control from Jake Paul in that particular moment. Jake Paul's limbic system can't handle it. He's out of control. He's out of his depth, is my point here. That's why we get some really weird, weak behaviour from Jake Paul, and then about 5 seconds later, and it is probably less than that, he realises what's going on. The prefrontal cortex, the decision-making part of the brain, starts to take over. It's a bit like when someone goes, boof, and you jump. And then a little bit after, you start to come down because you realise it's your friend. This is what's gone on. And then he gives it the big I am. Oh, come on then. No. You've already proved your weakness. You've already broke. You've already cracked in that particular situation there. So for me, okay, from the body language, Jake Paul is definitely up for it, okay? And make no bones about it, he's definitely up for it. You've got to give him credit for that. But also, there is some self-soothing going on. The one on the thighs, the one on the cheek, when he's talking specifically about fighting Ben Askren. From Ben Askren's perspective, that emotional baseline is solid. Up until probably the final 2 minutes of the press conference, he doesn't move, and then when he does, he opens himself up even more. Ventral frontal, like he feels no fear from Jake, from the event. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. This guy is a combat athlete. But also when he took Jake Paul's control away, Jake Paul reacted really negatively, unfavourably. It definitely wasn't the best version of Jake Paul. That's what I find so fascinating about this fight.
Showtime, baby. 22 days away. 22 days away. It's showtime.
The champ is here, baby.
22 days away. Bro, you in 36.
Get the fuck back here. Come on.
Is that, can Jake Paul stop Ben Askren? I think he's got more boxing tools, more arsenal than people give him credit for. Whether that because he's just he's not a nice guy, okay, but try to move that emotional basis. He's got some fantastic tools for this stage of his boxing career that he can draw upon. Can he take Ben Askren out? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's not mean he can, it doesn't mean he couldn't. But if he doesn't and Ben Askren takes him into those deep waters where he loses control, where he feels despondent, where his resilience drops, where his confidence starts to break, that could be really interesting to find out. Is Jake Paul a true fighter, or is he just trying to convince himself? Remember, please subscribe to Believe in Bruce. It'd be great to show the channel some support by giving a thumbs up and leaving your comments below as well. I'm really interested. Have you got the conviction? How do you see the fight going? And what are you basing it on? Let me know below. Remember, you can catch me at Instagram, Believe in Bruce 360. Any ideas for videos, that's where you can put those ideas. And also Twitter, Believe in Bruce. Free resources, believeinbruce.com. If you're interested in performance psychology, body language, mental health, anything like that to help you become more in control of your head and heart. Free resource at believeinbruce.com. Go across there, sign up to the mailing list. Some really interesting content I deliver on a bi-weekly basis, totally free of charge, just to share my knowledge with my audience out there as well. But more important than any of this, believe in Bruce. Please remember to be kind to yourselves and each other.